at 8. BBC Radio Kent has discovered drug driving was a factor in nearly 50 accidents in the county last year. That's more than doubled in 4 years. This includes recreational and medicinal drugs. Figures also show across the country nearly two-thirds of roadside drug tests were positive. In a moment, we'll speak to Kim Wolfe, Professor of Analytical Forensic and Addiction Science at King's College London. But first, Nick Freeman, motoring lawyer. Morning to you, Nick. Can you hear us, Nick?
Yes, I can hear you, Ian. Yep.
Good morning, sir. Nice to have you with us. What's your reaction to these figures? Two-thirds of roadside drug tests positive. Are you surprised?
Well, the roadside tests only relate to cannabis and cocaine. No other drugs are detected at the roadside. This is done by swabs. And
Yep.
I think what many people don't realise is that for illegal substances such as cocaine and cannabis, there is literally zero tolerance. So in other words, if you have a joint, a spliff, maybe 2 days ago, there may be the tiniest amount. The level is fixed, almost at zero tolerance. It's just to avoid passive inhalation. So there's literally nothing in your system. It doesn't in any way impair your driving. And I think the problem is, obviously the law is you can't use these drugs, you can't smoke them, and there's a double whammy, you can't drive with them, even if they don't affect your driving in any way. So that the fact that there is this amount doesn't mean that people are driving around dangerously, because quite often, in the majority of these cases, the drugs will have no impairment factor whatsoever.
Can that be guaranteed? No impairment factor? That's absolutely a bold statement.
As I say, it's zero tolerance. So when you look at drink driving, you have a level, the highest level in Europe, and they say that at the drink drive level, you're 4 times more likely to have an accident. So that level's pitched at what the government regard as being safe, even though you're 4 times more likely to have an accident. The drug-related level is set so that you can have no drug whatsoever in your system at all. As I say, zero tolerance.
Okay.
So it doesn't impair you. It's its existence, its presence, which is illegal. It doesn't impact on the driving. In the majority of cases,
but it might do. I mean, just to clarify that, I mean, if
you've
just taken a gram of cocaine and get behind the wheel, one assumes
absolutely. Then that's a different.
Then
situation.
it would. But you're saying the test that is done could just merely be detecting stuff that's been taken days before.
Yes, it's the presence, the slightest presence that doesn't necessarily impact or impair your driving.
Okay. And when it comes to medicinal drugs, one assumes then that could only be found in the system with a later blood test, nothing at the roadside.
That's absolutely right, and there is a defence for those. And the level, it's important to bear in mind, the level when you're taking a prescriptive drug, if you're taking it, it's prescriptive, it's in your lawful possession, and you're taking it in accordance with the directions given, then you have a defence, a complete defence to that charge. And the level is set far, far higher. So the level is set at a level where you might be impaired. So there's two huge contrasts between illegal substances, which is, as I say, zero tolerance, nothing in your system at all, and prescriptive drugs, such as, for example, sleeping pills, and I think this is where the problem lies, and this isn't detected at the roadside, where people are addicted to sleeping drugs, and that does very much impact on their driving and is hugely dangerous.
Indeed,
I'm not saying illegal substances aren't, but I think the figures, we can't break them down. And
indeed, it's hard to be sure what was the contributing factor. If you've got two-thirds of roadside drug tests positive, as you say, that could be a legacy of something that was smoked 2 days before. But if you've got a figure that says we've had 50 accidents where drugs were a factor in the person's system, then one assumes that could be a different story where we have got drugs taking hold and causing a problem.
No, you're right. But when we say they're a factor, what we're saying is the drug was present, not that it was a contributory factor. Then at the roadside, the two-thirds, it's present. It doesn't need to be a contributory factor. And I know that might sound like double Dutch, but I think you understand the point I'm making.
Indeed, I hear that. But where do the police go with this then? Because one assumes they want to try and catch drug drivers in the same way they catch drink drivers. You're saying they're two very different systems at the moment.
Well, the system, in my view, is in a total mess. We have a drink driving limit, which is far too high. It's wrong to say that people should be allowed to drive when they're 4 times more likely to have an accident. We've got the highest of any EU country. And in my view, for illegal substances, of course, it's illegal to possess, but I think we should have a level which is higher, which relates in some way to your ability to drive, your level of impairment. And I think that would make more sense. Because if you possess an illegal substance, you're already guilty of an offence. And unless that illegal substance impairs your driving, what is the point in making you commit another offence?
Sure.
It's pointless in my particular view. So I would say that that level needs to be raised and the drink drive level needs to be lowered.
So a driver is pulled over. They have evidence that they had smoked at some point recently, a joint, for example. Where do the police then go from there? If they've spotted dangerous driving, which they might have done, that you as a lawyer, I'm sure, would say, well, yes, but that's not necessarily down to the fact that they smoked a joint 2 days ago. There could be other factors.
Well, the first thing that happens is they're swab tested at the roadside. And if cannabis or cocaine is detected, they're taken to the police station. They undertake a procedure which involves a blood sample being taken, and we then have a precise forensic amount as to what that level is. And then we know from that level, with an expert's guidance and an expert will prepare a report as to how much is in the system, and we would know what the likely level of impairment will be. And it might be seriously impaired, it might be no impairment, it might be a little impairment. And of course, in conjunction with that, we have the police observations in relation to the driving.
Sure.
So if someone's driving dangerously, and let's assume someone's driving dangerously, and the police pull them and they have a tiny amount of cannabis in their system, it wouldn't in any way impair their driving. They still will be charged with a drug-related offence and dangerous driving. And it will be an aggravating factor that they had that dangerous driving attached to the drug, and the drug presence will be an aggravating factor for the dangerous driving, and they will be very likely to face a custodial sentence if convicted. So you don't say just because it's a tiny amount that excuses dangerous driving. There's a fence there that stands in isolation, and the police would deal with that, and it would be an aggravating factor that they've had a presence of cannabis in the system. The tiny amount of cannabis results in a minimum of a 12-month period of disqualification. And the interesting thing is, for a drink driving case, you can have a reasonably high level, and you get a 12-month ban, and then you get the drink rehabilitation course, which reduces the disqualification by 25%. There's no such course for drug driving.
So there's a disparity here. Nick Freeman on that point. Thank you. Motoring lawyer with us here on BBC Radio Kent. Let's